This is the most populous city in the United States. It is also home to a lot of rats, about 3 million of them.
Three million rats live inside New York City right now. One for every 3 people. And for 300 years, nothing has stopped them. Not traps, not poison, not even the $32 million the city spent on a single rat reduction program. But something changed. The rats started disappearing. No program claimed it. No exterminator explained it. They were just gone. And when a researcher finally found the reason, it was not on the street. It was not in the sewers. It was 60 feet above the city, moving in silence, in the dark. And it had been operating above those streets for years without anyone knowing. Nobody built this system. Nobody designed it. And what it is doing to this city's rat population is something 300 years of human effort could not. The scale of the infestation. 3 million. That is the official number. But here is what that figure actually means. It only counts the rats that people reported seeing. Research shows that for every rat sighting that gets officially reported to the city, dozens more go unreported. The 3 million is just what made it onto the record. The real number of rats moving through this city every night was far worse than anything on paper. And to understand how this city got here, you have to go back to where it all started. They did not start in New York. Norway rats arrived in the 1700s, hidden inside the cargo holds of European trade ships crossing the Atlantic. They slipped into the ports, moved into the buildings, burrowed into the ground, and started breeding. By the time anyone understood what was happening, the population was already beyond control. That was 300 years ago. They have not stopped since. In 2014, a statistician named Jonathan Auerbach used New York City's public complaint records to estimate the rat population at 2 million. 9 years later, a new study placed that number at 3 million. A 50% increase in less than a decade, despite every effort the city made to slow it down. These rats do not just live in dark alleyways. They get into buildings. They chew through electrical wiring inside parking structures and cause fires that nobody can explain until investigators find the damaged cables afterward. They dig beneath building foundations and slowly eat away at the structure from below. By the time the owner notices something is wrong, the damage has been building for years. But the most disturbing damage happens where people eat and sleep. New York City health inspection records document rat infestations inside restaurant kitchens across every single borough. Rats found inside grease traps. Rats burrowed into food storage areas. Rats moving across the same preparation surfaces where food is being made for millions of people every day. People sitting in restaurants across this city have eaten meals prepared on surfaces that rats crossed the night before. Most of them never knew. It does not stop at restaurants. Families across the Bronx, Brooklyn, and Lower Manhattan have reported waking up to find rats inside their kitchens, inside their living rooms, inside their children's bedrooms, not outside, not in the walls, inside the room. These animals carry more than 35 diseases that can transfer directly to humans. One of them is leptospirosis. It begins quietly, feeling like a bad flu. Then, in serious cases, the kidneys and the liver begin shutting down at the same time. In 2023, New York City recorded a historic high of 24 leptospirosis cases. Some of those people did not survive. And then there is something darker. Another pathogen found living inside New York City rats is called Yersinia pestis. That is the bacteria responsible for the Black Death, the plague that killed up to 60% of Europe's entire population in the 14th century. One of the most catastrophic disease events in human history. Yersinia pestis has been detected in New York City rats in published scientific surveys. There has been no outbreak, but it is there, in the boroughs, beneath the streets, beneath the restaurants, beneath the homes where millions of people are sleeping right now. The annual cost of rat damage across American cities is estimated at $27 billion. In New York City alone, the figure exceeds $1 billion every single year. 300 years, 3 million rats, $1 billion a year in damage. And the city had tried everything it had to make it stop. Every human attempt that failed. New York did not surrender without a fight. The city launched program after program, spent tens of millions of dollars, and tried every tool available. The rats absorbed every single one and kept breeding. Here is the math that made this fight almost impossible from the start. A single breeding pair of Norway rats can produce a lineage of roughly 15,000 descendants within 1 year when every generation is counted. The city was removing rats. The rats were replacing themselves faster than any program could keep pace. Every zone that got cleared became an open space, and rats from surrounding areas moved straight in to fill it. Pest control specialists call this the immigration effect. Within 18 to 24 months of any major intervention, the population in treated zones returned to where it started, $32 million. No lasting result. In 2017, the city launched that $32 million rat reduction program targeting 3 high-density neighborhoods. The stated goal was a 70% population reduction. Solar-powered trash compactors were installed at 336 locations. Pickup schedules were increased. Fines for illegal dumping went up. Carbon monoxide was pumped directly into underground rat burrow systems to suffocate entire colonies. But Norway rat burrows are not simple tunnels. They are complex underground structures with sealed inner chambers packed with soil. Exterminators have opened burrow systems after carbon monoxide treatment and found active rat populations sitting inside chambers the gas never reached. The rats were not killed. They were barely inconvenienced. Snap trap networks were deployed across targeted zones. Trained dog units worked Manhattan streets through the night. Poison bait was placed across infested areas. The rats responded by learning. They shifted their movement schedules to avoid the hours when exterminators were active. They warned each other away from poison bait sources. Professional exterminators describe placing an unset trap in a rat's path and watching the animal walk around it for days. New York rats were teaching each other how to survive every new weapon the city deployed. In 2023, the city created a government position called the Director of Rodent Mitigation. The announcement made international news. The rat population crossed 3 million the same year. A veteran exterminator who had worked New York buildings for 20 years told a city council briefing exactly what the data already showed. You give it a couple of months, and it is right back where it was. We have never found a tool capable of bending this population curve. Researchers at Fordham University stated the same thing in published reports. The only real solution is eliminating the food source entirely, and that has never been achieved in any city on Earth. The city had spent 300 years attacking this problem from street level, but the answer was 60 feet above it, and it arrived in the most unexpected way imaginable. The data that stopped making sense. Dr. Rachel Oakfor had spent 11 years tracking rat complaint data across New York City. After that long, the numbers were not just data to her. She knew the seasonal patterns by heart. She knew which neighborhoods got worse in summer and which ones stayed the same. She could tell what any block cluster should look like before she even opened her screen. On a Wednesday morning in November, she pulled the complaint data for a specific cluster of blocks in Upper Manhattan. This zone had recorded the highest rat sighting density of any area in her entire monitoring region for 6 consecutive years. By every measure, it was one of the worst rat corridors in the city. The numbers were falling. She sat at her desk for a long time before she picked up the phone. The timing made this deeply unsettling. November is the period immediately after the autumn rat breeding cycle, which means rat populations are at their highest point of the entire year. A drop in complaints during November is not a seasonal pattern. It is something that should not be happening at all. In 11 years of tracking this data across 5 boroughs, she had never seen it once. She called the Urban Ecology Office and said 5 words. Something is hunting them up there. That call reached Dr. Marcus Webb, a researcher who had spent 8 years mapping wildlife movement across New York City. When Oakfor's data landed in front of him, he spent 3 weeks trying to find an explanation. He tested every variable in his dataset: weather shifts, changes in sanitation schedules, neighborhood demographic changes, differences in how many residents were actually bothering to report. He ruled out one explanation after another. None of them fit. When every explanation he had was exhausted, he drove to that block cluster, climbed to the roof of a nearby parking structure, and stood there as the sun went down. 2 blocks away, perched on top of a water tower, was a peregrine falcon. Not a bird passing through, a resident pair, nesting, holding territory directly above the zone that had shown the steepest rat complaint decline in Okafor's entire 11-year dataset. Webb returned to his office and placed both datasets side by side. The pattern was not subtle. Every zone across the city showing a measurable drop in rat activity had documented raptor presence concentrated in the airspace directly above the corridors where rats moved most heavily during evening hours. Something had been hunting them. It had been doing it for years, and the entire time, every researcher, every exterminator, and every city official had been looking at the street. Why rats have no defense against this? Norway rats are not simple animals. 300 years inside one of the most hostile urban environments on Earth has made them extraordinarily difficult to kill. They learn, they adapt. They pass survival knowledge through their colonies like a set of inherited rules. They have learned to read human schedules and shift their movement to avoid the hours when exterminators are working. They have learned to treat new objects placed in their environment as threats, sometimes avoiding an unset trap for days before approaching. They have learned to avoid poison bait after watching other colony members die near it. At ground level, against any threat that moves horizontally across the same plane they occupy, they are almost impossible to catch off guard. But every piece of that survival intelligence faces in one direction. It scans the ground. It watches for shadows at street level. It listens for footsteps. It is built entirely around threats that arrive from the side. It has nothing for what comes from directly above. A peregrine falcon in a hunting dive drops toward its target at speeds exceeding 200 miles per hour. The dive is nearly vertical. It produces no sound the rat can detect. The bird has a small, bony structure inside its nostrils specifically designed to redirect airflow so its lungs are not destroyed by the speed of the descent. The entire strike, from the moment the falcon commits to the dive until the moment of impact, takes less than 2 seconds. The rat's nervous system does not have enough time to register that anything is happening before it is already over. Peregrine falcons in cities have also learned to use buildings as cover during their approach. They descend between structures in a way that keeps them hidden from below until the final seconds. The city the rat spent 300 years learning to navigate is the same city the falcon uses to stay invisible until it is too late. And the rat has absolutely no response to any of it. Not because it lacks intelligence, but because the peregrine falcon was completely absent from New York City's skies during the entire period, the rat population was building its survival instincts. The rats that arrived in the 1700s never encountered one. Their descendants never encountered one either. 300 years of survival knowledge was built around every threat present in this city. The peregrine was not among them. So no warning was ever passed down. No behavior was ever developed. The threat simply did not exist inside the rat's inherited memory. There is one more layer to this that makes it even darker. Rats that survive a near miss from a peregrine attack change their behavior in the days that follow. They reduce time spent on open ground. They shift their routes. They spend more time underground. The falcon does not need to catch every rat below its territory to change how those rats live. It only needs to exist above them. The rat built 300 years of survival knowledge against every threat it had ever faced. It never knew there was a gap above it. The 3 predators and how they divide the night. What Webb found above those streets was not one predator, it was 3. And without any coordination, without any shared plan, they had divided the hours of the day and night between them in a way that left rats with almost no safe window to move anywhere in their own territory. Peregrine falcons were functionally gone from the eastern United States by the 1960s. A pesticide called DDT, used widely in American agriculture and mosquito control programs, beginning in the late 1940s, worked its way up through the food chain and caused peregrine eggshells to become so thin they crushed before the chicks inside could survive. breeding populations from Maine to Florida collapsed. The skies above New York City, which had once been peregrine territory, went empty. Federal protection eventually stopped the chemical exposure. A reintroduction program starting in the 1970s placed captive-bred peregrine falcons on cliff faces and building ledges along the eastern seaboard. New York City turned out to be remarkable habitat. The vertical faces of skyscrapers replicated the cliff environments peregrines had nested on for millions of years. The city's dense pigeon and starling populations provided a food source no rural cliff could match. By 2020, New York supported more than 30 documented peregrine nesting pairs, the highest urban concentration of this species anywhere in North America. Peregrine falcons own the evening shift. Norway rats do the majority of their surface movement between dusk and midnight. That is when they travel between burrows and food sources out in the open. A peregrine pair holding territory above those open corridors hunts that exact window every night. These birds have also been documented storing uneaten prey on building ledges and returning to it over the following days. They are not hunting only when hungry. They are hunting consistently, above the same corridors, night after night. The pressure on the rats below never pauses. Great horned owls take the hours after midnight. Owl pairs have established inside Central Park, Prospect Park, and Pelham Bay Park at population levels that wildlife surveys from 20 years ago did not record.
There might have been one 200 meters that way, but...
They operate during the late-night hours after peregrine activity is wound down, when rats are moving most freely through park edges and open ground. The great horned owl makes no sound when it flies. It can locate and strike prey in near-total darkness, from 60 feet above a darkened path without producing a single sound the rat can hear. Great horned owls have been documented killing animals far larger than themselves, including other birds of prey. A Norway rat, large as the biggest ones in New York grow, is well within easy range for this bird. The rat's entire threat detection system registers nothing when this owl is directly above it.
Although most of the large predators in and around New York City have long since been wiped out, the red-tailed hawk is here to stay.
Red-tailed hawks cover the daylight hours. These hawks now nest on building ledges and water towers across all 5 boroughs at levels that represent a genuine expansion beyond their historical presence in the city. They hunt the open lots, construction zones, and connecting corridors between park areas. Red-tailed hawks can see ultraviolet light. Rat urine, which rats deposit along their regular movement paths as navigation markers, reflects ultraviolet light. The hawk does not search for rats randomly. It follows the trails the rats leave behind for themselves. The rats are unknowingly marking their own routes for a predator that can read every line. In the zones where all 3 territories overlap, where the peregrine hunts at dusk, the owl takes over after midnight, and the hawk follows the urine trails through the day. The rat complaint data shows the steepest and most sustained declines in Webb's entire dataset. 3 predators, 3 shifts, 1 population with no defense against any of them. And not one of these 3 hunters was placed there by any human plan. Nobody planned this. The peregrine falcon did not return to New York City because the city needed a rat solution. It returned because skyscrapers looked like cliffs and pigeons were easy prey. The rat suppression was never the goal. It was a consequence that nobody saw coming. The DDT pesticide that erased peregrines from New York's skies was not designed to harm birds. It was manufactured and distributed from the late 1940s onward to protect American crops and control mosquito populations. What it also did, without anyone intending it, was remove from this city the only natural predator capable of hunting rats from above. The rat population that costs New York more than $1 billion every year is, by a direct and traceable chain of events, partly the result of an agricultural pesticide program from the 1940s. The Migratory Bird Treaty Act, the federal law that protected peregrine falcons during their recovery, was not written with peregrine falcons in mind. It was passed in 1918 to stop commercial hunters from killing birds for the feather trade, which had nearly wiped out species like the snowy egret. The law that allowed the peregrine to come back to New York.
All right, get up, get up, get up. Beautiful, beautiful.
was written to protect birds being killed to decorate women's hats. Nobody who wrote that law in 1918 was thinking about rats. Nobody who designed the reintroduction program was thinking about rats either. Not one recovery planning document for the Peregrine Falcon program ever mentioned rat suppression. The $32 million rat initiative did not reference raptors anywhere in its planning documents. The rat czar position created in 2023 included no aerial predator monitoring in its framework. Great horned owl expansion into city parks was recorded as a birdwatching observation. Red-tailed hawk nesting on buildings was photographed by hobbyists. These two stories, the failing rat programs and the quietly returning raptors, were running simultaneously in the same city, above the same streets. For years.
You're literally sometimes walking right over the tops of the heads.
Nobody realized they were the same story. There is also a critical difference between what the raptors are doing and what every human program attempted. The rat programs cleared zones and left gaps. Rats from surrounding areas moved in to fill those gaps within months. The raptors do not leave gaps. They hold territory. They are present every evening, every night, every day, above the same corridors without interruption. The pressure never lifts. There is no rebound. That sustained, unbroken presence is the one thing 300 years of human intervention never managed to produce. And it arrived with no budget, no planning committee, and no one asking for it. The city spent $32 million looking at street level. The answer was 60 feet above it the entire time. The evening she finally understood. Dr. Oakfor returned to that Upper Manhattan block cluster 4 times after the discovery. Each visit was at dusk. She walked the same blocks. She watched the sky. On her 3rd visit, something else happened. A Norway rat crossed an open section of pavement between a building foundation and a parked car on the eastern edge of the cluster. It moved the way rats move at dusk, low to the ground, fast, staying close to the wall. The falcon came from above. The strike took less than 2 seconds. The bird hit the rat on open pavement and was gone before a single person on that street had time to look up. One moment the rat was there. The next it was not. Nobody around her reacted. Nobody glanced up. Life on the street continued as if nothing had happened. Oakfor stood on that pavement without moving for several minutes. For 11 years, she had tracked this problem entirely through numbers on a screen. Complaint rates, density scores, patterns that represented millions of animals she had never once watched in the moment that mattered. Every declining number in her dataset had always been a mystery to investigate, a pattern that needed an explanation. On that pavement, she watched a declining number happen in front of her eyes. She noted the time, the location, the species, and the duration of the strike in her field log. Then she walked to the subway. The peregrine pair had been making those strikes every evening since they established their nest 2 blocks away. The answer behind 3 consecutive seasons of unexplained data had been operating 60 feet above her head the entire time. Every morning she opened her screen and stared at numbers that made no sense. The explanation was already there above the street. Hundreds of thousands of people walk beneath active peregrine hunting territories in New York City every single day without knowing it. So here is the question that nobody has answered yet. If 3 birds, with no plan and no human help, managed to do what $32 million could not, what happens to this city if they disappear again?